Now, when we discuss Indian religion, we can see that Buddhism, being an Indian religion, Buddhism also shares, some aspects with other Indian religions, but at the same time also it is different. Now, when we look at this problem, the women and religion from Buddhist perspective, again we know that there is quite lot of things that are related to this issue. Particularly when we look at the origin of Bhikkhuni Sasana, how some of these perceptions of women, influence those discussions. It is very interesting for us to go into the Buddhist literature and see. Now, many people who have studied Buddhism have noticed not only one attitude, several different attitudes in Buddhism. Now, for example, if you look at particularly Jataka stories, they are larger majority of them very negative about women. Okay, Jataka stories are very negative. But if you look at the Dhamma, then the picture is different. The Dhamma is that whether you are a man or woman, you can realize the Dhamma. Okay, and then although there were problems at the beginning, you can become a nun, become a bhikkhuni, and then follow the Dhamma, become an arahant. So in that sense, there is no difference between men and women. On the one hand, in the Jatakas, you have, and not only in the Jatakas, there are also certain discourses, certain remarks attributed to the Buddha, talking about the limitations of women. And then also they say that if you look at the organization-wise, organizationally, women have been always kept under men. Bhikkhunis have been always kept under women. So that people, modern critics, criticize. Okay? But on the other hand, they also note that there is some kind of egalitarian, some kind of equality. They call it soteriological egalitarianism as far as realization of nirvana. There is no difference. So there are differences and there are no differences. There are positive things and there are negative things. So how can we really understand the Buddhist position? Because you can't say this is the Buddhist position. Of course, same thing is true for Hinduism also. Now in Hinduism there is, I think that also in Manusmriti comes the statement saying that where women are not respected, that family, that society is going down. Yatra naryo na pujyante, or something like that. So, what is happening? Okay, so very same Manusmriti says that women have to be respected and honored. Otherwise, the society will not prosper. But on the other hand, you have all kinds of... So, in a way, it is not describe these traditions in the absolute terms. Okay. Now, the same thing with Buddhist tradition. When you look at the Buddhist tradition, you can see that there are several different the positions. Now, particularly, I think Venerable, you wanted to ask this question about the Bhikkhuni Sasana, how Bhikkhuni Sasana originated. Now, the story comes in the Vinaya. Okay, the story comes in the Vinaya. According to this story, the Mahaprajapati Gautami asked 3 times, right? And all the 3 times Buddha said, no, forget about it, don't even think about it, okay? And then Mahaprajapati Gautami was very naturally upset. And then finally, they did something almost something like trade union action. She, all her group, shaved their heads and, the wearing monastic clothes and, follow the Buddha, came behind him. But so ultimately Venerable Ananda felt bad. Okay, he went and he intervened and he went to the Buddha on behalf of them and asked for the permission. Again, 3 times Buddha said no. Then finally Venerable Ananda asked from the Buddha whether a woman is not able to attain realized nirvana in this asana. Buddha said certainly she can. Then Venerable Ananda asked, then why not consider giving upasampada to bhikkhunis? Then Buddha said, okay, then if she accepts Attagaru Dhamma, then that will be. But for me this story is always problematic. Because the problem in the sense, when you think, we can ask the following question. Did the Buddha not see that women can attain arahanthood before Venerable Ananda asked this question? I mean, Buddha should have known it, right? That there is. Now, when you say that both equally men and women can attain arahanthood means, it says much more. It says that intellectually and emotionally, there is no difference, right? Particularly, intellectually, there is no difference between men and women. So Buddha, I mean, that itself is a breakthrough, really. To admit that, because the social situation was that women cannot. Now Buddha says, no, they can. But the important thing is this, knowing that they can, why was the Buddha hesitant? Now, many people don't seem to be thinking much about it. You just take the story at its face value. But I think it says something very important. Because you don't have to think that only Venerable Ananda had to remind the Buddha that women can attain arahanthood. No, because Buddha knows it. Buddha should have known it. But I think the important difference is this. It is one thing that women can attain arahanthood. But it is another thing to have an organization. Now this is like, it is not like, giving upasampada to 1 or 2 people. Buddha knows, when there is a group and finally, there must be a different organization. Now, this starting an organization within this organization, starting another branch within the organization is not really a joke. It is a very serious thing. Now, particularly if you look at now, I will like to give you 2 points. Both these points are not very much discussed in the text. Now, one thing is, you remember I said earlier, according to Hindu belief, a woman is always under somebody's protection. At home, father or husband or son. And then women were not going out very much. Now there is one sutta where why woman is not presiding among the group, like that. Now, because women were not used to those things. They were not made heads of organizations. They were not traveling foreign countries for missions. So women were basically kept at home. But for 2 reasons. One thing is they consider women to be limited. But on the other hand, women had to be protected. So they were protected at home. So, there is both positive and negative here, right? On the one hand, they are protected. They are not attacked by anybody. Now, here I think one very social thing is when the Bhikkhuni organization had to be started, I think Buddha had to think about it. Because you are taking a whole bunch of women from their protected household life to monastery. Now, who are going to protect them physically? Because now they have given up their husbands. They have given up their fathers. They have given up their sons, if they have sons. Now they don't like their mother or sister or daughter to leave. So they don't like them anymore. So you can't expect them to come and protect the nuns, right? Because they have already left their household life. Now who is going to do this? Who is going to be responsible for physical protection? Now you know the story of Uppalavanna, right? She was one of the two chief disciples of the Buddha. But she was raped, right? I mean, what a violation. And she was, I think, already an arahant, right? When she was raped. Now, you know, these are the things that could come. I mean, do you think that Buddha did not see these things? Now, when we say Buddha was hesitant, okay, like Venerable Ananda says, okay, if a woman can become an arahant, why not? Yeah, that's a very logical argument. But the thing is this, you know, there are things beyond that. One very important thing is, you know, this physical protection thing. Because women were protected in the Indian culture. Positively, that we have to admit that. Now, if you take those protected women out of their protected this thing, and then who are going to do the protection? Now, can you ask ordinary men to come and protect the bhikkhunis? It's not going to happen. And then the other thing is, can you ask bhikkhus to protect bhikkhunis? Some will go willingly, but that's true, but that's not going to be very good. And then, seriously, these men have left their household life, left their women, left their daughters. Why? Because they don't. Now, is it fair for the Buddha to ask the bhikkhus who have left their women at home to protect this set of women? No. Now, you see the organizational problem is there. There is a very big challenge, you know. Usually people don't address this issue. But I mean, I'm sure Buddha was conscious about this, you know. Because you are taking a responsibility of physical. Now, of course, you know, there had to be a lot of Vinaya rules. So the bhikkhunis are not allowed to observe rainy season in an area where bhikkhus are not there. Indirectly saying that bhikkhus protect. I mean, although bhikkhus will not do anything, mere physical presence will protect you, right? Now there are here both, we are men and women. So somebody will not attack, you know, the Siales because, you know, although we are not protecting, but our mere presence will, so, you know, Buddha said that, so the bhikkhunis are not allowed to observe rainy season where there are no monks. You see? And then bhikkhunis have visit every 2 weeks, and then bhikkhunis are not allowed to go alone. Bhikkhunis are not allowed to live in the forest. So there had to be many precautions because there were things. So, you know, I think this, why Buddha was hesitant, I think this physical aspect. And then another even more important thing, I think, is this. Now, if you look at, okay, women can attain nirvana, men can also attain nirvana. Attaining nirvana means what? Attaining nirvana means we get rid of our desire, lobha dosa moha, right? Now, if you look at men and women, as men and women, you know, the women have their desire for the men, and the men have their desire for the women, right? You know, this is the main desire we have. Now, how can you put these two groups together? You know, that simply is again self-contradictory, right? Where these men have come, live in their household life, women. The women also have come, live in their men. Then again you put these two groups together. Actually, it's problematic because if you look at the ultimate goal, this doesn't go well with the goal. It challenges, it poses challenges to the goal because you can't. Because you really have to be looking at, but then on the other hand, okay, men cannot attain nirvana in the presence of women, so you don't get women inside, that's also unfair, right? So, I mean, it is a dilemma, right? What the Buddha should do. I think the situation was like Buddha did not want to take this extra headache, right? But then finally, you know, Mahaprajapati Gautami is forcing, and then Ananda, his attendant, is also, you know, asking serious questions. Buddha said, okay. But you can, I think, I mean, many, the scholars, write about this, why Buddha did and why was, all these things, why Buddha was hesitant. But to me, these two reasons are very important. So, it makes it not very easy. And we know from the Vinaya Pitaka, then there were problems. As I said, Uppalavanna was raped. And then many other bhikkhunis had similar problems. And then, apart from that, what happened was some monks and nuns again started domestic roles. The bhikkhunis started coming and washing clothes and cooking and all that, what they used to do at home. Buddha would have said, that is why I said. Then, Buddha had to have more Vinaya rules to stop these things. So, anyhow, the interesting thing is, so I think we have to understand, even Buddha was, he was operating within a society. So, you can't really go against the society because, ultimately bhikkhus and bhikkhunis are dependent on the society, right? Because for their meals, they have to go out. They depend on the society. So, this manussa ujjayanti, khiyanti, vipachanti. That's very important. Many Vinaya rules came because of that. People are shouting. People are criticizing. And actually, according to Vinaya Pitaka, finally people criticize, oh, these women are girlfriends of these. I mean, people said that. Naturally, then people started saying that this, like that. So anyhow, I think, these two issues which I mentioned, you need to think about them. I think, these are some of the reasons why, Buddha was hesitant. But, of course, the Bhikkhuni Sasana was started and then, it flourished. And now, if you look at Etadagga Pali, interestingly, there are upasikas and also there are bhikkhunis who were like bhikkhus, who were very intelligent, who were the preachers of the Dhamma, and all these the positions, high positions they achieved within the Buddha Sasana. And then Attagaru Dhamma we they mentioned earlier. They are, if you look at problematic, even the very first one is problematic. But then I think there are some reasons, maybe social reasons. But again, very easily you can have two ways to look at this. Like very first one is maybe Buddha was responding to the social, the religious situation. In every other religions also, the women were kept, under the monks. And then also there is another Attagaru Dhamma, one of the Garu Dhamma, where it says that from this point of view, the women can't talk back to the monks, bhikkhus. It is the bhikkhus who. But that I consider to be, that looks like even more than the number one. I just can't imagine why Buddha had to say something like that, because if a woman says the right thing, whether it is the woman or man, it doesn't matter, right? Of course, this paying respect, we can say public thing. But then what about it's very possible that, the woman can be, the bhikkhuni can be the one who has the right view. But then why can't she say that to the bhikkhu? Bhikkhu may be not always right. But that means that women were kept completely under the bhikkhu order. So that is the whole reasoning behind Attagaru Dhamma. So many people think that Buddha did not come up with all these things. The number one is a very problematic thing for many. But I can see number one as a response to the other religions and the religious society. But I cannot see why this particular thing Buddha wanted to effectively stop the bhikkhunis going in anything against the word of the bhikkhu. I mean, only way to understand would be to, they have, maybe it is, the again, organizational thing, but I'm not sure. But anyhow, the Attagaru Dhamma thing. The other thing is, when we look at how Buddhism treats women, we can see now, if you take the Sikkhapada, number of Sikkhapadas are more. But then the bhikkhunis have all the Sikkhapadas that are for the bhikkhus. In addition to that, they have another set of Sikkhapadas. Now 4 extra Parajikas, and there are whole group of minor Sikkhapadas for bhikkhunis. In a way that is also understandable because, the women have different concerns from men, right? Men can move anywhere and, they can be in the night, they can be out, they can be in, they don't have much of a physical problem about safety. But for the women, it has to be different. And also, you have to understand religions were functioning in the general Indian society where women did not have a much respected place. So, all these things had to be taken into consideration. So, therefore, women have more rules, okay. But then, important thing is, when we look at Buddhism, actually Buddhist tradition has challenged the existing society in many ways. Perception of the woman. Okay. Now, on the one hand, Jataka, we have all these stories about negative things. Because in the Brahmanic tradition, they had a lot of negativity. And then that negativity came into the Buddhist tradition also. But basically, a very important issue is this. All the religions, because they were originated with men, you look at the problem from the man's point of view. Now, when you look at, okay, as I said, in Buddhism, attaining nirvana means getting rid of your desire. Your desire is basically for the panchakama desire for 5 sensual things. Now, so the main target of the desire of the man is woman, right? Now, as a result, you can see in the Buddhist literature, we have so much saying that, the woman is, like this, like this, like this. Now, why is that? I think basically it looks from the man's point of view. Because woman is the object of the lust, desire for the man. So you have to say that, it is negative things about the woman. But if you read the Dhamma very carefully, you can see it is reciprocal, both men and women. Now you know how Anguttara Nikaya starts, right? Nahang bhikkhave eka rupampi samanupassami yathedang itti rupam. Yang purisassa chittang paryadaya tittati. So the man's mind becomes completely obsessed with woman's body. So like that. But then the important thing is the next passage says completely other side. It is the man's body that can obsess the woman's mind. So it is reciprocal. It's not only woman. Now the important point I'm thinking is why we don't have much of the things Buddha would have said to women. Because we have a lot of things Buddha has said about women. But what about the things Buddha must have said to women? Bhikkhunis. Now why we don't have these things? It can have 2 answers. One answer is, I think which is very valid, is we can say Buddha never discriminated between men and women. The Dhamma is for both men and women. So therefore Buddha's teaching is for both men and women. Although discourses starts bhikkhave, bhikkhave. But we are told that within that group there were bhikkhunis, there were upasakas, there were upasikas. Dhamma doesn't have a gender. So one answer is that, Okay, Buddha taught these things because, there was no difference between the Dhamma for men and women. Dhamma is general for everybody. Now, that's I think, good answer, good reasoning. But apart from that, I think there is also the fact that now the existing Dhamma was rehearsed. Sanghayana was done by the monks, right? After the Buddha's parinirvana, after 3 months, monks got together, and it is monks, 500 Theras.
No bhikkhuni.
Yeah, where are the bhikkhunis? Very right. Where are the bhikkhunis? What happened to bhikkhunis? Why they were not included in the Sanghayana? I think that is an important historical problem. Because why they were not included in the Sanghayana? Maybe monks thought troublesome, come on. Only we do it or something. But why? Now, is it possible that bhikkhunis got together and had a different Sanghayana or something? Or they were simply ousted, but they accepted what the bhikkhus did? I mean, we don't know. No answers, only questions. Now, one thing I can imagine is in the Sanghayana, after the Buddha, it was Venerable Mahakassapa, right? But it is very well known that Venerable Kassapa didn't like women. Yeah, it's very true. He did not like women. Now there is one discourse in the Sanjutta Nikaya. Venerable Ananda wants to Mahakassapa Thera to go and teach the Dhamma to the bhikkhunis. He says no. Second time no. Third time no. But then Venerable Ananda somehow persuades to go and teach Dhamma. Now, when he went and teach the Dhamma, a disaster happened. One bhikkhuni got up and said, "Who are you to teach Dhamma in the presence of Venerable Ananda?" Oh my God. Yeah. Because Venerable Ananda was so popular. And then this bhikkhuni right away asked. And then Mahakassapa said, "See, this is what I said. This is what I don't like to go." Okay, now you can see that, this Arahant did not have, his nature was that because he was keeping away from, not only from women, of course, from society. Venerable Mahakassapa lived in isolation, he didn't like the group life, but also it is very clear that, he did not have any particular thing for, in a way it is wrong to say about an Arahant, but you can see that he didn't have much to do with, he wanted to keep away. Now, maybe perhaps this is the reason why there were no bhikkhunis to the first Sanghayana. We don't know what about the Dhammadinna and all that, but Venerable Dhammadinna, Buddha praised Dhammadinna, saying that, I would have said the same thing. Now, I consider this as something unique in the entire religious history, not only in Buddhism. Now, the religious teacher is the Buddha, if you take religious teacher. Now, Buddha saying that, okay, what this woman said is exactly what I would have said. Now, in the ancient world, the woman is putting in that high position. You don't find that kind of story anywhere in other religions, to my knowledge. So, so there were so many Dhammadhara bhikkhunis. But as you said, no bhikkhunis. And then, I don't know, perhaps it may be what the Buddha said to bhikkhunis, everything didn't come. Although, on the other hand, you can argue that, but the Buddha said this for all 4 groups, not only for bhikkhus. That's one way to look at it. But on the other hand, now I will tell you one more example. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, finally, when Buddha was almost, the passing away, Ananda asked, Venerable Sir, how should we behave towards women? Now, Buddha was almost attaining parinirvana. And Buddha says, Adassanang Ananda, don't look at them. Then he asked, how if we see them? Don't talk to them. And then Ananda asked, how if they talk to us? Then Buddha says, keep your sati, mindfulness. This story is problematic. Why it is problematic? Why Venerable Ananda has to ask this question when the Buddha was attaining Parinirvana? Now, Buddha was living 45 years. Bhikkhunis were there. Why suddenly this question? Why suddenly this question from Venerable Ananda? Because he was the savior of Bhikkhunis. Right? Bhikkhunis loved him so much. I mean, he was very popular among the Bhikkhunis. Not for bad reason, like, he was very, you can see that because he was the one who was very compassionate. But then why Venerable Ananda? Now, if you take this story, I think the story is problematic. It shouldn't have been. Maybe Venerable Ananda asked the question for the other sake of other monks. Maybe some of the monks did not know. Now, that is the only explanation I have, if Venerable Ananda asked. Now, okay, forget about that. How if a bhikkhuni asked from the Buddha, Venerable Sir, how should we behave towards men, bhikkhus? Then what would be the Buddha's answer? Can't it be the same answer? Adassana. Don't look at them. Don't talk to them. And then if they talk to us, okay, keep your sati, mindfulness. Can't it be the same thing? Now that is why I think that in the existing literature we don't have, the same question would have arisen to nuns, bhikkhunis, right? Buddha must have said to bhikkhunis, okay, this is how you should behave towards bhikkhus. Can't you think so? But we don't have that. If the Buddha had that discourse, we don't have it. Now I think, I'm sure Buddha must have taught a lot to bhikkhunis, with the emphasis for bhikkhunis. Now, issue is, the problem for the man is woman, the problem for the woman is man. So, their soteriological path requires certain emphasis. Women specific emphasis and men specific emphasis. Now, I think we don't have particularly the material related to women very much in the Buddhist, existing Buddhist literature. Now, as you said, where are the bhikkhunis? Now, did they have any other meeting? Did they have a leader during the time of the Buddha? We are not told anything, We are not told. But on the other hand, we know that Bhikkhuni Sasana continued. And then after 300 odd years, the Sanghamitta, Emperor Ashoka's daughter, became a bhikkhuni. And then she took the Bhikkhuni Sasana to Sri Lanka. And then, of course, Bhikkhuni Sasana spread in other countries, things like that. By the way, I saw something very interesting when I was recently reading Richard Gombrich, I think, Professor Richard Gombrich, saying that Bhikkhuni Sasana existed in Myanmar by the 10th century. I don't have the reference, but it is interesting to know how because my impression was Bhikkhuni Sasana did not exist this part of the world. It was only in Sri Lanka, but of course it didn't come from Sri Lanka here. But Bhikkhuni Sasana, Theravada Bhikkhuni Sasana existed in Myanmar, and then after maybe 1 or 2 centuries disappeared. Because in Sri Lanka also after 1 or 2 centuries, it really went into extinction. But history about Theravada Bhikkhuni Sasana, in Sri Lanka we have records up to about 12th century or something. One thing you can study is really what are the historical records from the writings of some of you. I can see that there is no unanimity about Bhikkhuni order in Myanmar. But whether Theravada Bhikkhuni Sasana was in Myanmar because of this encounter of Anavarata with Sri Lanka and this Pagan period, the revival of Buddhism. Okay, whether it was there or not, I think historically it is an important thing to think about it. But anyhow, the Bhikkhuni Sasana then disappeared from Sri Lanka, and then, so that story is there. So I think, but there were in Sri Lankan tradition, in the Deepavansa, we have a whole list of names of very well-known bhikkhunis. I mean, large list of names. So you can see that Bhikkhuni Sasana really flourished in, particularly in India. Only thing is we don't have information really. We have some information about the Sri Lanka Bhikkhuni Sasana, but not all again. Now in the Chinese history, they have reference to one Sri Lankan Bhikkhuni and a group who went to China and established Chinese Bhikkhuni Sasana there. Nanda Sara or something like that. So, but that particular event is not recorded in the Sri Lankan history. In Mahavans, it is not recorded. But then we know it from Chinese history. So there are stories like that. But anyhow, the Buddhist story, how Buddhism has treated women is, something very interesting. Now, in Buddhism, like also in Jainism, we have Bhikkhu Bhikkhuni and also Upasaka Upasika. And there are statements attributed to the Buddha, particularly when Mara comes and asks Buddha to attain parinirvana. Buddha says, like at the beginning, Buddha says, until Bhikkhu Bhikkhuni Upasaka Upasika become Vyatta, Vinita, Dhammadara, Dhammanudhamma Patipanna, I will not attain parinirvana. Okay, Mara goes. Now that is at the beginning. And then after 45 years again, Mara appears and asks Buddha to parinirvana. And he says, now your bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasaka, upasikas are well versed. Okay. Now you see the reference for all four groups in a similar terms. Isn't it something interesting? All the bhikkhu, bhikkhuni, upasaka, upasika have to be vyatta, vinita, visarada, bahusuta, dhammadara, dhammanudhamma patipanna. So these adjectives are there. But they are applicable to upasakas, upasikas, bhikkhunis and bhikkhus. Okay. So anyway, I think you need to read the text carefully and the critically. Then certain things you can question, you can ask. Well, I don't think overall we can see when we look at the Indian religion, there are certain characteristics which are common to all Indian religions. So the women were considered to be inferior and this thing. But at the same time, so those are common to Buddhism also. But at the same time, what I have been trying to tell you is there were many social factors had to be taken into consideration in thinking about the Bhikkhuni Sasana. But even within these social restrictions, I can say that Buddhism really is progressive in the sense that Buddhism considered to be women capable of being arahant, and the Buddha appointed them to be in very high positions equal to men. For example, Aggasavaka, Aggasavika. And then among the Aggasavika, you have like Venerable Sariputta, who is very intelligent by knowledge, and those characteristics are there, Kema and Uppalavanna. So in that sense, we can say that the Buddhism is in certain respects very different, unique in the Indian tradition in the treating of women. Okay, this basically some rough characterization. Okay, we will wind up discussion for today with this. Do you have any questions or comments or anything?